Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS and in partnership with Vertical Magazine. In this two-part series, Val Medved's away visiting Australia, so Faith Ortega and I step in to host a conversation with Rob Estey from Pathfinder Aviation. This podcast episode accompanies an article featured in Vertical Magazine that explores helicopter operations in Antarctica. Be sure to check out the February-March 2025 aerial work issue of Vertical Magazine to read more about this fascinating topic. During this series, we'll explore the remote operations of Pathfinder Aviation in Antarctica, looking at how advancements in aircraft technology, especially in helicopters, are enhancing safety and efficiency in extreme environments. We talk about navigating the evolving challenges faced by the industry today, including the lasting impact of COVID-19 on operations and recruitment. Rob discusses the preparation and challenges of operating in harsh conditions, from survival kits to effective survival training. He touches on the crucial importance of data transmission technologies like Starlink in remote operations. Rob and Faith emphasize the tools and strategies necessary for success in cold weather operations, while also highlighting the significance of mentorship and leadership within the aviation field.
Special thanks to our sponsors for this podcast, Precision Aviation Group and Rotorcraft Support, Inc.
Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS.
All right, everyone, you're ready to contact. You're cleared to the Bravo.
The Vertical MRO Podcast explores the fascinating world of helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul with your host, Val Medved.
Now, line altimeter 3029, approved as requested.
The podcast features helicopter technicians, mechanics, engineers, and MRO experts who share invaluable industry insight, knowledge, and stories that will inspire current and aspiring industry maintainers.
Hey, welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. Pretty cool saying that. I'm usually sitting here with Val Medved as the co-host, and he says that, but I've taken his seat today. He's actually traveling back from Australia on a work trip, and I think he's actually not far from me. He's sitting in an airport at LAX waiting for his next flight home, but really excited for this conversation and to allow someone like myself to sit in this seat and talk with Faith and Rob is going to be pretty awesome. Our co-host for tonight, Faith Ortega, she's someone who I've had the pleasure of interviewing on my podcast, the Hangar Z podcast, in the past. Had a chance to sit back as a co-host and interview her. I think it was episode 1 and 2 on the MRO podcast. Now we get to sit here with her as a co-host. So one, thank you for joining us in the past as a guest, and now for your first time as a co-host. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited. When I was telling my friends that I was doing a podcast, and they're like, "You're doing a what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll tell you guys about it tomorrow."
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, what you've done with your career and the outreach that you've had and the reach that you've had with not only the work that you're doing, but the work that you've done on social media is pretty awesome. So I think when it comes to part of the conversation we get into later about recruitment or retention, I'd like to, talk about that a little bit and how you've leaned on that, and Rob, maybe how you've done that as well throughout your career and where you are currently. And again, for this conversation today, man, I'm really excited. This is a joint venture between us and Vertical Magazine. I was given our guest's name, who's Rob, by the way. How you doing, Rob? He's got a unique operation. They're operating out of Antarctica. Gosh, I think about all the complexities that come with flying and operating in a climate like that. I have a lot of natural curiosity surrounding what you do, what your folks do, and how you do it. Being in Southern California, we don't see that climate, of course. Although I do live in the mountains outside of LA, so we do get snow. In fact, we have about 2 feet of snow predicted for this next weekend. So we'll go from wind to rain. On that, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see my screen is pretty much blacked out with a weird light. I'm operating under a camping generator that powers out as we kind of go through this annual wind event that we're dealing with here. The fires are burning in the LA area, and it's been kind of a wild couple weeks with all that. So anyways, it's cool to be here with you guys to take my mind off of the lack of power and everything that's going on with the winds in Southern California. So Rob, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John.
Where are you coming to us from tonight?
I'm actually coming to you from just north of Vancouver there, up in Kamloops, BC.
And it's super cold up there right now, right?
Yeah, it's relatively mild for this time of year. So we're talking about -7 C here today. So
okay, that's not too bad. I was talking to my coworkers earlier in the week, and they were saying it was like -20, -30 Celsius where they were.
Probably a little farther up BC then.
Yeah, that's cold. Faith, how are things going for you in your neck of the woods?
We got smacked with some snow. I guess it's now been about 2 weeks ago. Shut everything down. We got about 12 to 15 inches here, which that's not here in Missouri. I'm like an hour west of St. Louis. That happens once every few years. But I feel like as I get older, it's becoming more of a thing, but usually not to that caliber. So we still have snow everywhere, and actually it's nice to have snow when it's going to be that bitter cold, because usually in Missouri it's just cold and there's usually not anything to really play in or look at. So
yeah, is that the same system that went down and dropped snow in New Orleans and in Florida?
we actually got a wave. We were about a week and a half before them, so that one missed us. But it was enough to where the kids were out of school for a full week, so it was a free-for-all in the neighborhood. All the kids were playing out every day. The days were melting together. So
It's pretty wild to be Florida.
Yeah, it's been interesting, growing up in the mountains where I live now. We had snow days. That was every day it snowed, you'd cross your fingers, run downstairs, turn the TV on, and hope it'd say, all schools closed in your local school district. And now it's gone beyond that. Like my boys, the last 2 weeks have had no power days. So not all the schools have generators, which is interesting. So if there's a community within the school district that doesn't have power, then they're going to call school. So they've had no power or no school because of no power. They've had wind days. They've had snow days. It's been interesting. So poor kids can't get a normal year of school since COVID's taken place. But it's I guess for them, they're happy, right? Well, Rob, to you again, thank you for joining us again. Excited to dig into your background and your experience. Can you just give us a little preview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, my name's Rob Estey. I currently kind of hold the position here of maintenance director with Pathfinder Aviation. I manage basically the maintenance operation and the maintenance personnel out in Antarctica. I do a couple other things internally with Pathfinder, and I do things externally on my own accord. But that's basically the gist of it at the top level.
When you look back at your, elementary school self, was this something you ever envisioned? Was this a kind of a passion you've had as a kid, or how did you find yourself in the aviation world, in particular in the helicopter world?
Well, I actually started out in aviation at a very young age. So my father there was in aviation. He was a pilot mid-career. He changed over to the engineering side. Yeah, we, due to the nature of the helicopter business, we lived in a bunch of different remote areas here in Canada. Basically, every opportunity I had, I was involved or tried to be involved with the aviation line. And I think I got into a little bit of an IT thing halfway through. I wanted to have a little bit of edge, I guess you could say, in this business, but I wanted to make sure that I had a backup if there was any slowdown in the market too. Yeah, I still have vivid memories of tuning turbines with my dad when I was probably 8 years old. So I grew up with aviation, and haven't been able to stay away from it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely infectious, right? Once you get bit by the bug, it's not going anywhere. I know, Faith, you had that same experience, right?
yeah, it's a sickness. It really is.
You, Faith, if I remember correctly, your dad was more on the automotive side, and you kind of steered into aviation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my dad was on the automotive side of the house. However, he in his spare time, I feel like a lot of car guys, they always work on cars. And he was like, man, I'm just kind of burnt from doing that. So he actually used to restore old jet boats. And so that was how he kind of got to do something a little bit different. And I was like, all right, this applies to boats. What else is something, what's another avenue I could take this? And so long story short, ended up in aviation. And then a couple other friends were like, okay, what's even cooler than airplanes or helicopters? So, maybe you should take a peek into that. So I had no idea what that entailed. And a lot of awesome people pointing me in that direction is what got me where I am now. So no looking back, I'm so glad if I had to do it all again, I would do it the same way. So,
Yeah. Rob, for you, again, going back to when you were a kid, did you kind of figure out that you had a mechanical aptitude early on, or is that something you figured out as you kind of grew older?
No, I found that I had a mechanical aptitude early on. I mean, I think initially I broke a lot of things.
That's the best way to fix them, right?
Exactly. From tearing apart computers to other things there that my father had. Eventually I got to a point where I was able to fix them. So yeah, I've at a young age I found this was more my direction than anything.
You said you were involved in aviation at a young age, but did you find those skills kind of transferring into the automotive segment or any other sectors of, the maintenance world, if you will?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything that's got an engine, I was involved with it, from race cars to rebuilding engines to boats. It was anything that had a combustion system to it.
So now that you're in aviation, you're fully immersed and you've been that way. Do you still find outlets outside of aviation as far as working on that type of stuff?
I try to, I tried to stay in a little bit of the motocross stuff that we have, a little bit of the boating. But we more and more since COVID, we've been busy trying to support clients. Clients that we've usually had that just, their resources run to a minimal right across the board. So it's hard with everybody and the challenges there that we have these days just to have free time to make, any of the extra recreational activities outside aviation. I got a family, so I put that first and then the recreational stuff after.
Yeah. The conversation surrounding 2020 and COVID is really interesting to me because there was a lot of things that happened good and bad for folks. And obviously it impacted aviation in a unique way. Can you talk about how COVID in particular impacted your operations and maybe some of the lasting impacts that you're seeing still as a result of that? Rotorcraft Support Inc., where expertise meets excellence in helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. FAA and EASA certified Part 145 repair station and OEM factory authorized service center, keeping your aircraft mission ready since 1986. Visit us at rotorcraftsupport.com. Rotorcraft Support, trusted by the industry.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in COVID in this industry found other venues, other industries to work for. Our group ourselves were the busiest we ever been. Canada was shut down as far as flights go, but most of our group was deemed essential services on both sides of the board. And, we were going back and forth. It was great to travel, honestly. You'd be the only person on a European trip there, all sprawled out, traveling, or, only person on the highway from Kamloops down to SeaTac. Traveling was easy at that point. So there were some good things. There was also some bad things there. But our basically workloads, tripled, maybe even more, through that whole COVID period, which, that wasn't bad in some respects.
Yeah, it was an interesting time for me being in law enforcement as a pilot. Like you talked about essential services, our job never changed. We went to work just like it was a normal day. And I remember flying around and like you said, there's nobody on the roads. If there was a car, it would draw your attention to it because it was abnormal, and then I remember getting on the freeway at 2:30 in the morning to go home and it's pitch black. You're used to the constant stream of lights on the freeway. I remember getting on, I'm like, this is really eerie, and it was just a unique time. It was challenging for a lot of reasons. And I think it's interesting to talk about that. And again, the impact that it had in aviation is pretty profound, from the part supply issues to operations and all that. Faith, what did you experience during that time?
At that time, I was working for an E&G company, right? So we used to lease helicopters to the news stations. So at the time, I remember there was only a handful of us that were at the main shop, the 145 repair station. And we thought, heck yeah, like these helicopters aren't going to fly as much, so we're going to be able to catch up on maintenance. Well, sadly, no news is news. So every helicopter flew nonstop, and they're like, the smog has gone away, and there's nobody on the highway, and everything's empty. So our helicopters for all of our news stations across the country were just like constant. So like you said, I'm like, okay, this backfired. It was like a lull for like a week, maybe 2, and then it was just like rotors returning the entire time. So we traveled exponentially the entire time, and they considered us essential, like you'd mentioned. And so we were flying, and like you said, I was on, Southwest, United, American, all these different airlines, and I'd be the only one, or, not even in just my row, maybe in like that whole portion of the plane, which was pretty crazy. So yeah, it was quite the time. It was way different than what I anticipated it would be, but yeah, it didn't slow down for us.
Yeah. Rob, for you, I know part supply was an issue and in some ways still is. What was your biggest challenge as far as, maintaining the operations of your shops with part supply and all that stuff?
You need to get a little bit more creative, especially in the part supplies. Everything was scaled back. I think a lot of the OEMs didn't realize what kind of operational hours they were going to have. A lot of the big OEMs went to the SAP systems and made assumptions that, they were going to have big reductions right across the board. So everything kind of almost went to a standstill on, a lot of the OEMs' plates. So, as a parts supplier, it kind of worked out better for us. We looked at actually, aircraft that were cycling to the end of the lives. We purchased a couple packages and just parted everything out, just make sure we can get, our base customers, operating and, keep them in operations.
I'm curious, when you talk about the recruitment part of our industry, when you think about how many kids were affected during that time with school shutdowns and all the things that happened during that time, do you guys feel like there was an impact on the industry as far as maintainers go with the reduction in educational opportunities and outreach and those types of things in that era, or not so much?
I don't know if we've really seen it yet. I think there's probably something there, but I don't know if we've really seen that impact before. I see a lot of people in that age group that are retiring. I've seen a lot of people disperse in COVID days. They go to different industries there where, they're working for home. They get a little bit of change of standard of living, I guess, with that program. But yeah, I haven't really seen where the new generation, how much is it's actually depleting off, if there's really effect there. Yeah. I know a lot of the schools out here, we're training foreign students. A lot of the Chinese would send their students over to the Canadian side because their education platform was full. Most of the schools, as far as maintenance and aviation on the western end, didn't really have a lot of people going back into the domestic industry that I found.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting there as the years go on just to see what kind of impact that might have happened.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's definitely the older generation that it affected the most because, some of them that were thinking about retirement were like, well, I might as well just do it. And I feel like the airlines and some of the bigger 135 and, 121 companies were like, well, they were pushing initiatives. So, it's just less people on the payroll. But the sad thing is they already had issues trying to get young people interested in the door before that happened. That just opened up even more slots. And now they're like, okay, we were behind the curve, but now we're really trying to figure out what we can do to get young people interested because the numbers really skyrocketed on open positions. And I know the company I used to work for and the company I work for now, they're both feeling it, and everybody's talking about it and trying to brainstorm. But coming up with something that we can do is the more tough part, because everybody can talk the talk, but walking the walk is the tough part. So.
Yeah. I feel like the recruitment issues, it is in every part of our industry. You know, it doesn't matter if you're flying, if you're maintaining, or you're in some other role within aviation. Everybody's struggling to figure out how do we fill these seats that are being left vacant by the folks that retire. And I know for law enforcement in particular, it's really challenging, because not only do you have the challenges that come with just the recruitment by itself, but you know, there's a political and social environment that's not really conducive for people to want to be like, oh, I want to do that job, you know. But for Rob, from your perspective, what can we do as an industry to make aviation more appealing and bring it to the forefront for folks to look at and be like, yeah, that's something I really want to do?
Well, I think the biggest problem in aviation these days is there's no development process, and operators don't spend enough money in that section, I guess you would say, of the industry. When students come out of school, you know, essentially they're not hireable for, well, they get hired, but they can't be put on the floor for 2 to 3 years, you know, unsupervised is really what it comes down to. So that 2 to 3 years is a development process that every operator's got to invest in. And I think there needs to be more of that. Even in my stages of the game, we do not really hire too many people with, low experience levels. Everybody comes in with a lot of factory training. They get paid for it, but we don't have a development process there to bring that lower level industry in. Whether it's subsidies in the industry or, you know, incentives through the government, I'm not sure what the answer is there, but I think that's the loss, the biggest loss there in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That first job, doesn't matter if it's aviation or anything else. You come out of school and you've got no experience, and everyone wants experience. They want 2 to 3 years of experience. Well, how do I get experience without having experience? You know? So it is a challenging part and a puzzling part of the equation. I like what a lot of people have done, you know, inviting folks in to work, you know, as a, on a lower level, kind of shadowing folks. You get paid less, but you're learning a great amount, you know, and kind of shadowing in that way is, I think, is great. Faith, for you, based on what you've seen in the different operations you've been a part of, do you find anything that you've seen that's been effective in dealing with that?
There's been a couple A&P schools I know locally that have been kind of experimenting, right? Because most of the time when, you know, someone wants to pursue an airframe and power plant license, the time frame or duration is about 2 years, typically, is what it takes. There are accelerated programs and there are like test out programs, right? So someone's got experience in the military or OJT. Obviously that outweighs in quite a bit. But there is a local school, and I thought this was an awesome idea. So it's a 2.5-year program. So the first year and a half, you spend quite a bit of your time in the classroom, doing all the things, checking the boxes. But that last year, there's a local company that's a 145 repair station. So you're still considered in school, but for, 6 of the 8-hour day, you're buddied up with a mentor. And so you actually get to work on the floor. They're limited on tasks that they can do, and they have it pretty strategically laid out on which students can be with which mentors and how many can be in an area, all of the things. But they've noticed a lot of the guys that are mentors really enjoy having the students because they usually pair them with someone that's seasoned, been around the block, maybe someone that's not in an office job yet, but they're probably going to be soon. So they have more time to show them around and do those things. And the students are getting real hands-on experience, not just the classroom. some of the stuff that they learn in A&P school still, I'm shocked they keep it in the curriculum anymore. Having to learn about dope and fab and having to do, pressure carbs and things like that they're probably not going to see like World War II era aircraft. They're actually getting to work on legit aircraft. This is somebody's business jet or whatever the case may be. So I really hope that here in the next 2-3 years, when they can really start showing the numbers on how this is progressing, other people will take a page out of their book, because it keeps the students engaged. And a lot of the students that are leaving that program are going straight to that 145 because they're like, hey, do you have a job opening? And they're like, we always have job openings. So you can just roll your toolbox over here. So it's been working out really well. And I think some of the larger companies are probably going to start doing stuff like that so they can, funnel and teach their own people.
Yeah, that's huge. I love those kind of innovative solutions to things. And I think aside from the educational part of it is a visibility part. I think that's kind of what we're trying to solve here at Vertical and through Vertical Valor in the podcast that's, covering this segment. But you, Faith, have done a great job with your socials. Can you talk about what you've done a little bit and with your socials to make this industry more visible for people to kind of get more of an understanding of what it means to be a part of this industry?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, just the biggest thing that I've been doing on social media is just exposure, right? So a lot of kids that grew up or growing up in rural parts of the country or that weren't immersed in the world of aviation, how they're never going to know it's an option for them or it's a thing. So at the time, when I started my channel, I was just posting like, what is an A&P? A lot of people that want to work on cars or on boats, there are some certs that you can get and achieve, and it makes you more well-rounded, or you can work in certain shops. But ultimately, a lot of people work at mom and pop shops. They don't have any cert, and they're great mechanics. But to be an A&P, there are some boxes you have to check and some things you have to do. And so just being as transparent as I can, all the different acronyms and all the things you hear when you're outside of aviation, it sounds really overwhelming. And so I feel like a lot of people don't know what it takes to pursue a career. They think it's just out of their realm. So that was my biggest intent, was just to be transparent and to answer those, questions that people might be more embarrassed to ask. So I thought that the majority of my audience would be people high school age or that were a little bit more impressionable. But it was funny. I actually found out most of the people that were contacting me were actually exiting the military. So they had worked on years on military aircraft. They just wanted to know what it took to make the transition to work in the civilian sector. So, but I feel like companies and all these people that are seeing not just my page, but the need are starting to be a little bit more transparent with those things and post more. Everybody is always scared to post things, right? Because especially with all the liabilities that come with being an A&P or a pilot, obviously always showing things that, are done in the book, or showing references, things like that. But I feel like that's what's gotten people to take a bite at my channel. It's just been, this is what a helicopter looks like uncowled. A lot of people don't know what that looks like, all the inner working pieces. So I try to make it fun and upbeat. And I feel like that helps too, because, if I'm putting people to sleep, I'm not really doing my job either, because people don't want to watch that. So, but yeah, just being lighthearted and transparent is the biggest thing. I think that's made my stuff catch. So
yeah, it's been super impactful, and your audience is huge. Your visibility has grown dramatically over the time you've been doing this, which is great. Rob, for you, based on where you are and the experience you've had, how do we impact the high school age folks that Faith had talked about in a better way? How do we show them that, hey, this is an option, instead of waiting until they get to the military and they see at that point that it's an option as far as a career goes?
I think it just has to be a little bit more outreach. Something like this. I mean, this is vertical, even with podcasts and reaching a little bit more than what it used to, right? So the aviation industry it's a small market, right? And at the end of the day, most people know 75% of people out there in the aviation industry. So yeah, it's just outreach and these new social programs there that I think that will definitely help that. And then a little bit of the development process there, with the help of the operators out there, and maybe some assistance there through the government.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Career days with the high school programs, all those types of things where, once you see that it's an option, you can realize that it's something you can pursue and it's not this foreign thing. So I'm happy to see how technology is kind of stepping in to fill those roles from the visibility standpoint. So thanks for going through that rabbit hole with me. I love talking about that stuff because, again, it's impacted every part of our industry. I think it's important to consider different ways and get different opinions on how we can improve the visibility of our industry and ultimately improve our industry as a whole by recruiting the best people from society to fill those seats. Rob, going back to you, and we started talking about what you're doing in Antarctica, but can you talk about just Pathfinder as a whole? Can you give us a broad overview of what Pathfinder does and in particular what you do there?
Yeah, well, it's as a whole, Pathfinder, their main operating areas in Alaska, right up to the North Pole. So it's really cool working for an operator that's at two sides of the globe at different poles. They support ISEX. ISEX is a U.S. Navy program. They go up on a floating shelf. They have a couple 212s that support that whole naval program. It's a 3-week activity to basically check out the readiness of the U.S. Navy up in the Arctic. And actually, our 212 that's down in Antarctica has been in both poles in the last 10 years. So wow. That's it's kind of neat. It's got some different paint jobs in between, but it was supporting 376. Papa Alpha was supporting ISEX in 2022. Now it's down in Antarctica as of the 2024 season, supporting the NSF.
Wow. Yeah.
Other than that, like I say, it's a lot of mineral exploration. DOD work. Very safety oriented group. We're almost to a point where we're 98% complete, I think, on HUM systems fleet wide. It's a very forward moving company, I guess you could say.
Can you talk about how the HUM's adaptation has really helped you guys? And what that looks like for your operations in Antarctica in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weekly or bi-weekly process for me, even going through the data on the aircraft. There is some analysts there over at GPMS that look at our fleet directly. Have to give a shout out there to Josh Keegan there over at GPMS there and help and roll out in the new installations to Antarctica. But we go through those weekly, bi-weekly, and essentially every aircraft's different as far as the vibration levels, the data. But there's a lot of data sourced with these new HUM systems these days. I mean, you can even account how long a pinion is in contact lash with another pinion. That's how much data you're getting through on this. So, I mean, preventative maintenance is key, but it's also a safety source. But we're always watching what's going on with the HUMS data, the oil spectral analysis, and then we can basically predict or try to predict, what component's going to be coming out of the aircraft.
Gosh, that's the kind of stuff. Talk about technology that I love. It really changes our industry for the better in a lot of ways. Faith, for you guys, is that something that you guys have adapted as well?
I will say that the majority of the fleets that I have worked on have been a lot more legacy aircraft. So don't have as many of the internal systems on board that'll give you a little bit of a heads up like he's talking about. That would be crazy. I can't even imagine how much schooling that you would. So what type of helicopters are these
The two 350 B3s.
Okay.
And then 112s. But yeah, it's their legacy aircraft. Well, the 212 is essentially too, but there's a lot of the Type 1 aircraft that everybody kind of crosses over and with the contracts and the assumptions that don't have hum system.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say a lot of the aircraft I'm working on are a lot more legacy, so they don't have some of the bells and whistles. I mean, they do on the interior for the medical side. Some of the other, camera systems that are mounted to the front, I feel like those are a lot more technologically advanced than the helicopters themselves sometimes that I'm working on. So, but that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, I think the first moment we were dealing with a lot of R&D there previously before with Honeywell, and we had an EMS helicopter. It was a 412 platform. The aircraft was rebuilt and rejigged. We had a problem with, actually, we could see that we crossed a threshold with a gear pinion in the 42-degree gearbox. We removed that gearbox, swapped a couple other things out in troubleshooting, but it took a little while. But we actually figured it out with the jig work. The jig itself was off, and that aircraft was probably, the tail boom was about 3/4 of an inch off from the main airframe, which was the whole drive end was pulling the coupling. So, I mean, just with that alone, we pulled the gearbox apart. You could see no shadowing on the pinions itself, but you could see it in the data.
Is that not something you would have been able to determine outside of having HUMS present with that particular diagnostic tool?
Yeah, and honestly, that gearbox probably would have went the full scale to overhaul without an issue, without throwing chips. You'd probably, your opinions would be over limits at overhaul. So there in itself, it wasn't essentially a safety issue, but you saved 2 pinions out of an overhaul, and it's part of the idea behind HUMS is a fiscal idea, right? It's a financial.
Yeah, you're saving money and you're increasing safety from my perspective. And as a pilot, you're kind of I feel much more at ease knowing that there's a HUMS system on board operating a single engine aircraft over a densely populated area. I like the idea of having that just one extra layer of data and peace of mind knowing that we're good. I like that.
It's that much less work too. I can't even imagine, when you get chips, it's too late. So, if you can catch it before it has a come apart, from a logistical standpoint, there's that much more money you save, less man hours, all of the things. So, and if it gets stuck somewhere, when it does throw a chip light. So yeah, safety and then, cost effect, that's crazy. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, and it can pinpoint the algorithms, and you tie into a SatLink program and tell it where to send the data to. You'll get pings in the middle of the night, real time, when that aircraft's flying, and it will tell you you've got an input bearing that have crossed a vibration threshold.
Wow, that's insane. Especially considering where you guys are operating. And now maybe is a good time to talk about data transmission in those environments. We talked about offline how Starlink is revolutionizing the industry as a whole in a lot of different ways. And my example of that is in the recent LA fires, one of the local news agencies was broadcasting using Starlink instead of using the microwave downlink systems, which have been used for quite a long time. Well, the two microwave downlink receive sites had been burned over, so that they were inoperable, leaving all the other news agencies out of position to broadcast. Starlink gave them the capability to broadcast, which is cool. It's cool from the perspective that they're able to do that. But think about all the folks who may have seen the broadcasts and realized how dangerous the situation was and took action and left because they saw what was actually happening as compared to just hearing about it. So I think it's changing our industry and making society better as a whole. For you and what you guys are doing, can you talk about how you guys are employing that and some of the benefits you've seen? If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel at vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. From the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography, Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry.
Well, yeah, we're monitoring it. The biggest thing is having a group of people internally watching the data. There are analysts there outside, but I think there should be a responsibility for the operator to monitor that data internally, right? So yeah, like you say, it's a weekly event for me as an upper layer, but those guys are putting it through the system daily. Unfortunately, they don't have a live link on the aircraft down there where it spits out any threshold closures or limit closures there through individuals there that are dealing with the hum system in those aircraft directly, but they're getting downloaded by the team daily. There currently isn't a Wi-Fi approval, which they're working on right now, and it was originally certified under cellular transmission. Well, we got a cellular transmission problem because we don't have cellular up in Antarctica. But the boys over at GPMS are working on the Wi-Fi certification, and once they complete the next EC 145 certification, it will be a little bit easier for the guys on site. It will just be a matter of leaving the battery on in that zone, and that all that information will be transmitted there over an IP.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how one little component, just the communication side, can change things kind of for the better. Faith, have you had any experience using Starlink or any of those kind of technologies in your operations?
I know that when I was in the E&G world, our different camera systems that we had on the front of the helicopter and being able to transmit to all of the stations sometimes was a challenge. So depending on, weather, not only weather, but terrain, if we weren't getting a good signal, but everything was good on the helicopter, sometimes we'd have to have them climb to like 10,000 feet, just to see if it was a helicopter, if it was their antenna or their receiver on their side. So it's crazy, though, some of the technology and the cameras that have come about in the last couple of years. These cameras are worth more than the helicopter, and they're mounted up to the nose. The guy that's in the back working the camera, it's basically, it's like a giant touch controller. He probably makes what the pilot makes, and he's sitting back there, working this entire camera. And some of them were, we had FLIR, we had Shotover, we had Cineflex. There were all these different companies, different makes and models. But, it's just crazy how our helicopter could be sitting in a hangar, and then all the way on the other side of the airport, they could zoom in on like a license plate temp tag, like how clear and accurate these things were. So, I just know that as time went on, all the stations always wanted the latest and greatest, and seeing, just how much technology has come, even in the short time I've been in the industry. It's wild to see all the accessories and things that these helicopters are capable of, and all the mods we can do to them just to, break into other industries. So
Yeah, what's cool to me about the cameras in particular, and I'll reference shot over because that's what I'm familiar with. I'm used to buying something, and the moment you take it out of the package, that's the best condition that thing's ever going to be in. You're going to get the most features, the most capability day one of using it. And from there on out, you kind of have a reduction in ability and functionality. Whereas now, like the shot over cameras, what you get is the camera system, which you can upgrade and update the lenses as you go. But because it's a software-based camera system, it's like an iPhone. Your features and the things that you can do only improve and increase over time. So it gets better as you use it, which is really kind of a neat concept as a consumer and an operator, that it isn't the best when you take it out of the package. In fact, it gets better as you continue to use it, which is really cool, So going back to you, Rob, and you guys' experience with Starlink, how has that helped you guys in your operations in Antarctica?
Almost like day and night. I guess you could say at the end of the day, we could not have a Teams meeting, online with the bandwidth the guys had previous. And this is the first cycle of approval with Pathfinder and the approval with Starlink. So the people that were involved with the PHI and Air Center are just, like I say, it's day and night. They're blown away. You can have a crystal clear conversation. Somebody can bring the phone out for troubleshooting. And we can go out on site onto the helipads and we can walk through the systems, right? So it's kind of a game changer there on that end.
Yeah, how cool is that? I know Shotover would remote into our helicopter in our hangar, and they would troubleshoot and diagnose problems we were having with stuff. Outside of having Wi-Fi access, that's not going to happen. So having that ability and access for you guys in Antarctica, to even if the opportunity arose for someone to remote into your aircraft and troubleshoot some of that stuff, diagnostically through the computer systems, how great is that? Going to the climate itself, you kind of talked about walking outside to work on the aircraft. I'm curious to hear about the operating environment there. In my mind, it's like opening the freezer and that's where you that's where you live and work. My brother, he was stationed in Fairbanks, Alaska for a while, and I remember him talking about the move up there. He drove his F-150 from Colorado up to Fairbanks, and I remember him talking about a lot of the components, the rubber components in the truck, basically going bad because it was so cold. So think about on the aircraft what that means, and also what it means for the person that's walking out and doing work outside for whatever the reason is. I'm sure you want to do work inside as much as you can, but there's probably days where you just can't help but having to be outside. Can you talk about what it's like to operate in those conditions a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cold thing. There's always that cold component. The weather variations, I think, between one side of the globe or the other are not too much of a disparity. A lot of the guys out there, we all have experience with, the Canadian Arctic, the Alaskan Arctic, the North Pole. So yeah, I mean, you get into those situations where, especially metallic objects there, where you can't get gloves into certain areas there on engine sections, and sometimes you get your hands in there and you lose some fingerprints.
Oh, jeez. That's wild.
The biggest problem down in Antarctica is the high winds. It's those guys could be very particular on tying those aircraft down with high wind tie downs, tying the airframe down to cement pads. There's winds upwards of 80 knots coming through and higher, and if there's some slack that comes out in the tie down center, you're going to have aircraft movements. You're going to have damage to the main rotor. It's all, everybody's methodically got to tie everything down when everything's unoperational and unattended.
For the new person who's coming to work at your base, what's the most common mistake that that happens when it comes to something as simple as tying the aircraft down?
So it's usually the individuals that are coming down to Antarctica. It's almost like another day on the job. So we haven't at this point in time brought any of our crew that wasn't really adapted to cold weather and a lot of snow.
So you're not taking the guys from Georgia, Louisiana over there for a trip?
Or not in California.
Yeah.
That'd be rough.
Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Rotorcraft Support Inc., where expertise meets excellence in helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. FAA and EASA certified, Part 145 repair station, and OEM factory authorized service center. Keeping your aircraft mission ready since 1986. Visit us at rotorcraftsupport.com. Rotorcraft Support, trusted by the industry.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel, at vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. From the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography, Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry.
Hey everybody, this is Val here with Vertical MRO. Thanks for listening to this part 1 of our series. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your support does help and create more content like this. For those of you who want to continue the conversation, join us on our social media channels and platforms or visit our website over at verticalmag.com. We'd love to hear all your thoughts and questions about today's topics. Until next time, I'm Val. This is Vertical MRO. We'll be seeing you.